Get started. So good afternoon and welcome to an issue briefing on LD 906, an act to provide Passamaquoddy tribal members access to clean drinking water. This legislation is intended to support tribal, federal, state, and local efforts to improve the quality of drinking water available to residents of the Passamaquoddy Pleasant Point Reservation, the city of Eastport, and the town of Perry. We're pleased to be joined today by Passamaquoddy Tribal Representative Rena Newell and Corey Hinton, who serves as leader of Drummond Woodsum's Tribal Nations Practice Group, who will talk more about water quality challenges and this legislation, as well as what is needed from the public health community to advance this effort. For those that don't know me, my name is Becca Bolas, and I'm Executive Director of Maine Public Health Association. We are very supportive of this effort and are excited to be able to offer this opportunity for you to learn more about this legislation. We did receive some questions in advance, and if there are others during the presentation, please enter them in the chat and I'll facilitate a Q&A at the end. And then lastly, in case you missed this at the beginning, this meeting is being recorded. So if you don't want to be on the recording, please turn off your video. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Representative Newell and Corey. Thank you again for being here.
Greetings to you, Becca, and everyone on this call. Extend a hello, of course, to Corey Hinton, that will more than likely carry me through this presentation. Welcome the opportunity to spend a little time with you to go over where we are today in presenting this legislation, LD 906. I think just a little background information here. I am Rena Newell, and I serve as the Passamaquoddy Tribal Representative for Sabayeg and Mendocmiguk. I'm in the fourth year of my first and final term, with the ability to run for this position in another 4 years. But I want to say that my work began on this issue more actively in 2019. However, living here in Down East Maine, living here in Sabayeg, I'm directly affected by the water quality issues, having lived here my entire life. And for decades, tribal citizens here in Sabayeg have long felt the results of a lack of access to clean drinking water. We receive our water from a state chartered public utility, formerly known as the Eastport Water Company. And then it was chartered under late state legislation in 1983, becoming the Passamaquoddy Water District. The district serves the tribal citizens of Sabayeg, as well as citizens located in the city of Eastport. Currently, our water comes from a lake. I believe it was about 7 miles from my home. And it comes down the pipeline to a location about 2.5 miles from my home. And that's where the cleaning process occurs. So at various times, just to go back to the Boyden Reservoir, and Corey can speak to this, I think there's been issues with the lake as far as its depth diminishing over the years, and the way in which the water is often affected by various times of the year. Fluctuations in its quality are often occur during the summer, and certainly affected by wind and rain and other weather events. I think I really took notice, not having, again, I've experienced this, but I've said this before, I think living here in Sabayeg, I have to say perhaps that I've become accustomed to the quality of water, but more so become more vocal about trying to make changes to the quality of water here in Sabayeg. we started really receiving reports from the tribal citizens actively submitting photos at various locations located here on the reserve of the water that was coming from their taps. Often the water could be seen in varying colors. And I think one most notable photo that I received was from a parent who was filling a swimming pool up for their child during the summer months. And the color of that water was a neon green. So that I was surprised to learn that even after that parent had done the necessary shocking treatment to change the color of that water, the filter on that pool system still remained, quite dark in color, a brown filter. So I started paying more attention to the water that was being not filtered, but coming to my house directly. And at various times, I would report myself the color of water that I received. But in addition to tribal citizens reporting not only the color of the water, but the taste of the water, and at various times, the odor of the water. So with that, I think we had some conversations with administration about the need to really communicate with the tribal citizens in regards to the water and the water quality. But going back to when we first really started working on this, there was more, just prior to the pandemic, there was more efforts in trying to supply the tribal citizens here in Sabayak with bottled water, having known before that our tribal citizens would often travel 15 minutes to fill up gallons of water at a nearby well that was made available. But we thought we would come together and start having internal tribal meetings in regards to trying to improve the water quality issues here. I think we were successful in those weekly meetings, which later led to larger stakeholder meetings. So for the past, I would say 3 years, we've been actively meeting and trying to find solutions and trying to exercise any options on trying to remediate this issue and to bring a focus of addressing this issue. So with that, I'm not sure if I provided enough of a background information on it, but I think I'm going to hand it over to Corey that will begin to speak about the efforts that kind of stem from the internal water meetings as well as the larger stakeholder meetings.
Thank you, Representative. I'm just going to try to go back a couple of slides here to give a little bit more background and follow up to what the representative shared. So as Representative Newell mentioned, the water at certain times of year that comes from PWD is brown, yellow, discolored depending on what's going on in the system. At times we see that it's bluish greens if there's an algal bloom or something like that in the water source. I want to make really clear though that although those superficial indicators of water quality are very clearly at times of year very negative, the water quality itself has been tested on a regular basis, as is required under state and federal law. And the source pretty regularly, if not almost always during the spring and summer months, tests above the legal limit for a particular group of chemicals called trihalomethanes, which can form as a result of the disinfecting cleaning process for the water system. The THMs that are particularly present in this system, the THM is chloroform, and we believe that it accrues in the system specifically as the chlorine cleaning agents are interacting with organic material that are otherwise present in the system. The system it accumulates significant amounts of organic material. It's a surface water source that is the reservoir is fed by a lake, and the two bodies are connected by a sort of swampy stream. The lake is it's surrounded by camps. It's used heavily for recreational purposes. It is used for agricultural grazing purposes, and then that water, and actually the lake itself, some of the camps that have been built around it are quite old, and so they were built before there were rules requiring the setbacks from water bodies and construction, including septic tanks. And so the body of water that serves this drinking water supply is from a sort of fundamental infrastructure perspective, it's susceptible to contamination from a variety of sources. The reservoir itself also receives runoff from the road, and all of these materials are what the water district has to clean. And essentially, when the water is coming through brown and yellow, they're failing to properly filter out all of the organic material. What you can't tell to the naked eye when that happens is that those colors are indicators, as we've seen, that there are likely high levels of THMs in the water. We've started conducting our own water testing on the reservation to try to determine indicators for when THM levels might be high based on when water color might be off. And generally speaking, higher levels of discoloration is an indicator that there's most likely higher levels of trihalomethanes. And the water is pretty reliably discolored from late spring through early fall. So for about 4 to a 6 month period. So this is a snapshot of what the system looks like. And so now I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing to address these issues, which will lead right into why the legislation is necessary. Is the representative mentioned that the tribe has been organizing meetings going back several years now. And we were really focused on this issue by the last tribal chief in 2019, after the water turned a color of a neon bluish green. And at that point, the chief then, Marla Dana, she reached out to me and said, Corey, what are we going to do? The water has always been like this. No one knows if it's safe to drink, but we get these notices. And she shared a notice, and the notice said, notice of drinking water contaminants. If you're receiving this notice, you should know that your water supply tested above the maximum contaminant level for trihalomethanes. They can cause liver failure, cancer, and birth defects if you're exposed in high quantities. That was sort of like the start of this all. We started talking to the water district, and they acknowledged sending these out pretty regularly, like every quarter for about 2 or 3 years. But they maintained that they were always in compliance with the law. And so we decided that it would be important to improve overall communication between the water district and the tribe, to help bring together the tribe, the water district, the state, the federal government, to look at ways to bring in additional funding to help support their efforts, to look at potential alternate supplies, and to look at upgrades to the system itself. We've been pretty successful in that at a high level. Since then, there's been hundreds of thousands of dollars put into to upgrades and to the delivery of water within the community. In particular, in the pandemic, the tribe had access to about $250,000 in money to combat the pandemic. And we actually repurposed that money from combating the pandemic to provide direct financial assistance to the water district to help support a key upgrade, which you'll see referenced here as a granular activated carbon filtration system. These are essentially filters to be added to the end of the cleaning process to help remove color and odor and trihalomethanes. The district couldn't afford to pay for that itself, and it also cannot afford to maintain these filters, which have to be replaced every few months. But this idea of the upgrade didn't even exist until the tribe essentially asked everyone to come to the table and just start thinking about ways to help improve the system as a whole. And so it was through the course of these conversations that this potential upgrade was identified. We view it as a sort of medium-term solution because at the end of the day, it's just about really cleaning water that's already really, really dirty. And as Rena mentioned, the water supply itself is becoming increasingly shallow, which makes it increasingly susceptible to swings in water quality. And not just because it's becoming increasingly shallow, but also because due to climate change, it's expected that there'll be more extreme weather events as opposed to less extreme weather events in terms of prevalence over the next several decades. So these these efforts have resulted in progress in dialogue, but not in any real change on the ground. That filtration system that we talked about, it has not been implemented. There are pretty significant delays, actually, even though the tribe dedicated resources, the state dedicated resources. The water district says it now won't be able to install that until later this year. That was supposed to be installed in December 2021. And so the bottom line is that on the ground, we have all these problems and nothing has changed. And so this legislation is intended to help support the long-term efforts of the tribe and the water district to improve the quality of water available in the area. And it would do so in three primary ways, which are summarized here. First, and we'll discuss each of these in a little bit more detail as we go on here, but the water district, PWD, that delivers this water, it's a municipal district under state law with municipal representation from multiple municipalities. It's the only water district in the state that pays property taxes. This legislation would exempt it from paying property taxes, and the savings would help pay for the upgrades, the maintenance on the upgrades that we've mentioned. The legislation would also protect the tribe's ability to access groundwater located on tribally owned lands in the immediate vicinity of the reservation. In particular, would allow the tribe to take those lands and to put them into a protected legal status, which is how most tribes hold their lands throughout the United States. And this status would allow the tribe to use the land the way that it would like for the purpose of developing clean water available to citizens. And then finally, the legislation would allow the tribe to regulate drinking water on its lands. As I'll talk about in a little bit, the state of Maine takes a position that the tribe has no authority to regulate drinking water, not even water that is located exclusively within the reservation. The state says that we really can't access any of the federal laws or the funding that's available to help tribes regulate their own drinking water. And so the legislation would amend the Maine Implementing Act to allow the tribe to act like other tribes with respect to the regulation of drinking water. The property tax exemption. As I mentioned, PWD is the only water district in the state that pays property taxes. It actually succeeded a water district that was called the Eastport Water Company that served the same exact area prior to 1983. That water district, Eastport Water Company, did not pay property taxes. In 1983, Passamaquoddy Water District was created under state law in response to the fact that the existing water company was failing and posed a direct threat to public health. At that point in 1983, when this water district was created, all of a sudden it became subject to local property taxes. It's not really clear why that happened, but it's interesting that the addition of the name Passamaquoddy to the name of this water district seemingly is what precipitated the requirement that property taxes be paid. So Section 1 of the legislation would, in a very simple way, simply strike out this Section 15 that you see here in red, and would make clear that the water district can be like other water districts and not pay local property taxes, which is really to help improve their ability to deliver to those same municipalities that they pay taxes to. Phase 2, part 2 of the legislation would allow the tribe to put lands that it already owns into this federally protected status, and would do so in a way that doesn't allow local municipalities to veto that. Elsewhere in the US, tribes, generally speaking, if they own land that's very close to their reservation and they want to use land for something like drinking water, they can apply to the federal government and put that land in this federal status, and it's very non-controversial. In Maine, tribes cannot do that, and actually municipalities have the ability to veto tribes' ability to add lands to their reservations. In this area, that's resulted in the tribes being asked to pay $250,000 or more to towns to put the land in protected status. This is after we own the land. Like, so we buy it, we say we'd like to build houses or drill a well, and they're like, okay, it'll cost you $250,000. That's what they've done to us in the past. This legislation would effectively allow the tribe to put the land into this status without having to go through that process, which is something that the tribe really can't afford. What's most significant about these lands is that they're places where there's known to be water. One of these sites is immediately adjacent to the reservation, and we've been trying to develop a well there to provide a source of water so that tribal members can just fill up water. As it stands now, people drive about 15 to 20 minutes one way to fill up water at an unregulated private well. And the water there is not even known to be safe. It's just known that there is water. So people will go there 40 minutes round trip if they can get there. One of these parcels would replace that need. It would have essentially an on-reservation fill-up spot right there in the heart of the community, so people don't need to travel upwards of an hour to get clean water. The other parcel of land is right near the reservation. It's on farmland that the tribe owns in the town of Perry. And on that site, it's known that there is a large supply of water that could be an alternate supply for the current municipal one. The tribe has previously attempted to verify the feasibility of using this water supply on its land as an alternate supply. But the local town passed a law to block the tribe from making its own water available. And so by putting the land in the protected status, the tribe would be able to protect its ability to use the water and to make that water available to the water district. So that would be really as a way to protect the supply for use. The last parts of the bill talk about and get to really the ability of the tribe to regulate water. As I mentioned earlier, elsewhere in the United States, tribes have access to certain federal laws that help with the regulation of drinking water between tribal and federal authorities at the EPA. And tribes also have the ability to regulate water within their own lands without interference from state governments. In Maine, we don't have that authority. In Maine, because of the Maine Implementing Act, the Maine Settlement Act, the state of Maine has taken the position that it has authority to prevent the tribe from regulating its own drinking water. In the pandemic, a couple of years ago, there was an attempt to, there was a brand new school that was built. And it's called Zebaik School. It's beautiful, built with federal dollars, not a dollar from the state of Maine. It's located in the heart of the reservation. And the school was, it replaced an older school a little further down the road on the res. That older school, they have a policy of not letting the kids drink the municipal water because, you know, the water fountains get the same brown water that everyone else gets. And so they have a policy of buying bottled water for the students, which is most people, will buy bottled water or fill up elsewhere. So the school had this policy of bottled water for the kids. When they built the new school, though, they wanted the kids to be able to drink the water from the water fountains. Think about that. They wanted the kids to be able to drink the water from the water fountains. So they decided to drill a well in the heart of the reservation to serve children, tribal member residents of the reservation, with water at the school located in the heart of the reservation. The efforts were made to dig the well, and then I got a call from the Attorney General's office. And we were essentially told that we needed state approval to do these sorts of things. We said respectfully, we think that these are examples of internal matters that are not subject to the state's jurisdiction. I mean, this is about us getting water for our kids, water from our reservation for a non-reservation activity. And they said, we don't see it that way. You need approval for us to do any of these things. We had to expend resources in both tribal leader time and money for legal fees to negotiate an agreement with the state to allow that school well to be up and running so the kids could have clean water in their water fountains. That dynamic, the need to do that, was horribly paternalistic. It felt as though we were subjects of the state and we're going to be at the discretion of the whims of the state at all times. Now, this essentially meant that, when it comes to that brown water that comes, there's nothing we can do about it. All we can do is pay our bills, which total in 6 figures every year, and accept the water and not complain. This legislation would flip the script, and it would allow the tribe to regulate drinking water on its own lands. It would say that drinking water is an internal matter. It would say that the tribe can pass its laws and regulate its laws, and it can do so all in a manner consistent with federal law. There are very specific federal laws that govern safe drinking water in the United States. The state of Maine implements the Safe Drinking Water Act. The tribe wishes to do so within its lands. Elsewhere in the United States, tribes have the ability to regulate drinking water under the Safe Drinking Water Act and under their own inherent tribal authority. As I mentioned before, the state of Maine takes a position that it has all that authority. And although we would respectfully disagree, this legislation would clarify that the state no longer has the authority to regulate drinking water within the reservation, and that drinking water is properly regulated between the federal government and the tribe, which is how drinking water is regulated everywhere else in the United States on tribal lands. So that's the third component of the bill. As I said, component one would equalize the tax treatment of the water district relative to other water districts in the state. Part two would protect the availability of clean drinking water for residents of Pleasant Point and Eastport. And part three would allow the tribe to utilize federal law to regulate drinking water pursuant to its authority under federal law. So I will stop there and we can answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Corey and Representative Newell. You covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. There are a lot of questions, so I'm going to dive right into those, and I'm going to try to group them as best I can. So the first is just a clarifying question for you, Corey. You were talking about development on tribal land and being charged $250,000, I think was your example. And the question is just who is charging you that fee?
Yeah, so actually it was $350,000. I said it's
Sorry.
sometimes more of a $250,000 because, it was easier to say. So for those that don't know Pleasant Point, the community, it's a small community in terms of land base. It was once larger, and time saw pieces of the reservation be lost. And the tribe has been able to repurchase little bits of land and add them to the reservation over time. And at one point in the early 90s, because the reservation was so small, there was a really severe housing shortage. And so the tribe had land that it owned, and it wanted to build houses on the land. And now, if you drive onto the reservation off of Route 1, you'll see that housing development right there. The tribe went to the town and said, we'd like to build these houses. The town said, well, our laws don't allow you to do that. The tribe said, well, let us, put it in the protected status. The town said, okay, but we have to do a town referendum and you have to pay us $350,000 and you have to agree to never use the land for anything other than housing unless we approve it. That is a very, very challenging dynamic. And it was one that in the early 90s, I think that the tribe, it had some money from the land claims that it was using to buy lands. And so it could use, the money to put that land in the protected status, but that money's all gone, that we don't have that ability. The tribe is very, very, very strapped for financial resources. And so, we can't really even afford to engage in that conversation if it's going to mean that we have to pay money on top of the price that we already paid to own the land.
Thank you.
And I'll just note that because of the way the Settlement Act is set up, if we don't meet the demands of a municipality, they can just say no. And so this legislation would allow the tribe to effectively put the land in the status without having to, pay all of those fees and go through what felt like a horribly discriminatory process.
Thank you. Do you know if the water district is using monochloramines in their treatment of the water?
I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know any of the technical stuff in terms of the additives or the cleaning and that, but Representative might know.
I do not know. However, I would mention that I was able to pull from the district website the 2018 and 2019 consumer confidence reports. So was that Nikki that asked that question? That was a cleaning question, right? A processing. I think this is compliance related point of reference that I just made. So I don't know at this time.
The one thing I could add here is that the district does what it is required to do under federal law to stay in compliance on like a rolling basis. So they take the position that if water quality levels spike in certain times of year, it's okay. If at other times of year, the water levels are more acceptable. They, work on the law of averages. And so, you could be 5 times the legal limit for 6 months, but if the other 6 months out of the year, you're way, way below the legal limit, it passes. That should scare everybody because that's how all water districts in the country function. What we see is that the way that these water laws are set up, these drinking water laws, they're not really as protective of human health and public health as they are a balance between some degree public health and to the other degree the financial realities of probably running a water district and the cost of regulatory compliance and all of that. And we hear this all the time that the water district is in compliance. We had a period over the summer after a hurricane where the water had been discolored for an extended period of time. And then it started burning people's skin. And people that weren't even from the district were, bathing their kids in a bathtub on the res, and all skin irritation problems were coming about. And so we let the water district know. And they said, well, you don't know that it's our water that's causing these problems. And we're like, oh, well, we have, the ability to use logical inferences as well. And we do think it might have something to do with your water. But they said, you don't know. Our water is in compliance with federal law. And so we tested the water. They test one place in the entire system 4 times a year. We tested 10 places, and all 10 places failed. All 10 places on the reservation failed. The place that had some of the worst water is our elderly meal site, where elders live and where all of their meals are cooked. At that place, it was almost twice the level of chloroform as what's allowed under federal law. And we know that these types of carcinogens are particularly dangerous to the most vulnerable populations, young children and our elders. And these are our most, valued members of our community, our future and our, our elders, and we value them, to know that we have no control, according to the state of Maine, over the carcinogenic water that's delivered to our elders at their meal site is a travesty. So this point of compliance and what's in the water and what they put in, they're putting in lots of things, but we know that they're always changing what they're putting in because they're never really able to keep up. And that's just sort of like the rolling problem.
Thank you, Corey. What about the town of Eastport? What about Imperia? What's their, are they satisfied with the water that's being supplied, or are they fine with it? Are they not fine with it? What's the attitude of the other residents?
It's interesting. If you ask the water district, they say they don't get any complaints, except for from the tribe. When we talk to people, we know that people complain about the water in Eastport. There was a concerned citizen survey done in like 2014, and it was posted in Eastport. And I think that, and like the library and the grocery store at the IGA for folks who know the area, and like 95% of the respondents said that they don't use the water. We have tribal members and friends and people that we know that live in Eastport, and they don't use the water. You talk to people that grew up in Eastport, the chances are that they didn't drink the water. But what you see is that many people can, in Eastport, probably a higher ability to buy water or to pay for a well to be installed. And so, it feels like there is a socioeconomic divide here that's affecting responses on this sort of issue.
So there's a question, there are a couple of questions about this. So if people go to the bill's website, it's a concept draft, and I know that you posted the sponsors amendment in the chat. Do you know when that will be posted to the site so that people who are trying to share this within their networks are able to direct them to the site to do that? That's part one. And then part two is, can you talk a little bit about the difference between the hearing that happened last year and then what's happening on Thursday?
Sure. So we submitted this language to the committee last week. So I don't know why it's not publicly posted. Representative, you might be able to shine some light on that.
I saw that question appear in the chat, and I was somewhat surprised to learn that it has yet to be posted. So I just reached out to get some clarification on whether or not there was some additional material that needed to be provided by Corey and I before that was posted. I'm awaiting a response. They're just checking with the analysts. So hopefully, we expected that to be posted at least by last Friday. Certainly would like it to be posted today and be available. The concept portion, yes, is available there. I think the second question was the expectation of what to expect on Thursday, and the second portion of this, I won't say a public hearing, because when it was initially heard in the first session of the 130th, my intention in that being introduced at that level within the Judiciary Committee was to have it put forth so that it would be tabled and carried over. Not sure what happened where they entered into somewhat of a public hearing at that time. So we expect a full public hearing on Thursday.
And I'll just add to what Representative Newell said, that the bill it was only a concept for a very specific reason. Well, there's two reasons. One, we hope that the situation would improve on the ground. It was our expectation, based on the water district's representations, that a pretty significant upgrade would have been installed to the water district beginning at the end of last year, and that it would have been completed in time for the upcoming bad water season, as I like to say, which is the spring and summer and early fall. We've learned now that the timeline is it's being pushed back again and again. which means that there's no relief for the customers of this water district during the upcoming bad water season. So that was a major reason. You know, we felt like we've been waiting for this water district to do things for 40 years and nothing happens. And so we put in the bill so we could have a vehicle in the second legislative session, which is apparently, you know, what you have to do in the main legislature sometimes. So we put it in there, not wanting to introduce language. We also hoped that LD 1626, a separate bill, a large tribal sovereignty bill, would be on a path to enactment. That legislation would address a lot of the same things that this bill would do in terms of allowing the tribe to protect its lands and to access federal laws to protect its lands and to protect drinking water. That bill faces a very uncertain path to enactment. And so this legislation is designed to be much, much, much more narrowly focused and was specifically developed as we saw, you know, the constellation of stars coming together, suggesting if we didn't do this now, it would never happen.
Thank you for that, Corey. There were a few questions about how this intersects and is different from 1626. So I think that you helped to answer that just now as well. Thank you. There are many questions about this, which is a good thing, certainly. People are wanting to know what they can do to best advocate and support this effort. What do legislators need to hear from people? I know certainly they can testify at the hearing, but what else would be helpful from folks that are on here and from their networks?
Well, testimony is the biggest thing that we need right now. We really would like to be able to show members of the Judiciary Committee on Thursday that this is a significant nonpartisan issue that deserves support because of the merits of the issue and not because it touches on political issues, whether it's, you know, Republican or Democrat or tribal sovereignty or not. It's about public health and clean drinking water for people who need it. And we think that the hearing is the best way to show that, to get started. We would encourage people to consider sending letters to the editor to local newspapers, to consider phone calls to their legislators, their elected representatives to the legislature. We've done talking points. We have that folks can use in any of this outreach. You can, you know, pick and choose, take what makes sense for you, spin off of it if you'd like. We have this PowerPoint presentation that we've shared that folks can also draw from in that outreach. And we also are going to have a one-pager done in the next couple of days that folks can use for outreach too. And we're trying to do a grassroots widespread ground game here. And so we're trying to activate folks to do whatever kind of outreach you're comfortable with. But I think testimony right now would be huge. We're looking to make a splash on Thursday. But Representative, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry, I was reading a response in regards to the question that was posed earlier, but I think, Corey, I picked up on the majority of what you said, but did you mention the Wabanaki Alliance? And its coalition has supported LD 906. So a lot of what Corey mentioned has been posted either to their Wabanaki Alliance website or their Facebook page. But just to respond to the question posted earlier, I know Corey has posted the amendment language in the chat, and that is available. How we just verified that as the question was probably coming forth, that the proposed amendment has been sent out, received and sent out to Judiciary Committee members as well as interested parties that are on a list. However, we are still awaiting it to be updated to the Judiciary Committee website. So I expect that it'll be there this afternoon, shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for getting that answer so quickly. There are a few questions about municipal zoning and how municipal zoning is preventing the tribe from using water on your land, and just how that was established? Is that from the Settlement Act? Is there other historical context there? And then similarly, there's a new question in the chat now around which agency has jurisdiction, and it does seem to be the municipality. Could you just talk a little bit about that overlay and some historical context for that jurisdictional oversight?
Sure. In 2010 or so, the tribe obtained a federal grant to help study alternate supplies of water for the area. And that included looking at literal alternate supplies like the water owned by the tribe. There was a consideration of like desalinization, of large upgrades to the system itself. And in the course of that feasibility study being done, focus was put on this tribally owned land in Perry that is mentioned in this legislation. And there were tests done to determine if there was a quantity of water available that could be an alternate supply of municipal water. So they had to do a lot of water pumping, and they pumped, and some of the pump testing, it negatively affected local domestic wells, unregulated wells that hadn't been properly dug. And that led to a large local outcry. The town very, very quickly passed a moratorium banning all water drilling for water and pumping for anything other than for private domestic purposes. And then they followed up passing a water extraction ordinance that essentially makes it a very, very costly endeavor to even apply for a permit, let alone be approved for a permit to do any kind of water use other than for singular individual domestic purposes. These laws were passed directly in response to the tribe's efforts to get drinking water for the district. And they're essentially what's made it really, really hard to use the water the way that the tribe wants to use the water. So like when we wanted to get a small well dug to get a fill up spot, we had to go to the town, we had to ask them, how does the ordinance work? And they said, you're not going to have an issue with these small wells. It's when you want to really use more water that you're going to have to, be prepared to pay. And so the municipality has these local ordinances that essentially dictate how land can be used if the land is not in this protected status. And so under the Settlement Act and under federal law generally, tribes typically prefer to put their land in this protected land status. We call it trust status. And in most places, land that's in trust status means it's under the jurisdiction of the tribe and the federal government, and not state or local governments. In Maine, it's a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different, but you have the state and the tribe, and you don't have local governments. So if the land, right now it's not in that status. So the state and the local government have total control over the land from a regulatory perspective. And the tribe's trying to essentially get out from under that, and to do so in a way that would allow the tribe to regulate water directly with the federal government. So there's sort of like overlapping jurisdictions. The water district itself is the entity that controls the water supply, though. They make all the money to do all the things related to maintaining the water supply. They have primary jurisdiction, and so they're the primary public entity. And then there's the municipalities that have some overlap, and of course the state over that. So that's the current lay of the land, if that helps answer the question.
I think so. I'm seeing some nodding, so I think that does help. Thank you. When the new water, so if this bill, if it passes and new water sources are developed, will they continue to serve the PWD and Eastport, or is this intended just for tribes? And I think you touched on this a little bit, Corey, but just to put a finer point on it, what opposition to the bill do you anticipate?
Yeah, good questions. So as far as the changes to the water system go, Nothing in this legislation is intended to alter how the water system operates. Nothing is intended to, cut off the flow of water to the city of Eastport, which would be slightly downstream. It's really just about making sure that on the one hand, the district that serves Pleasant Point and Eastport, it's called Passamaquoddy Water District. It's not our water district, okay? It's not our water district. So this is about making sure that that public utility has more money to pay its ongoing maintenance, which would directly impact, we think, the quality of water delivered to Eastport and Pleasant Point alike. And if the legislation was implemented, it would enhance the ability of the tribe to protect water that on the first hand is intended to be available for any member of the public who can go and fill up a water jug. And on the other hand, for the other parcel, it's intended to be a supply for the utility. I mean, we had previously made this potential supply available for the feasibility study as an alternate supply for the state regulated utility, not just to be a tribal supply of water. And so this is really about supporting, the overall efforts for the city of Eastport and for the tribe. But we just see that if it's not the tribe that steps up to deal with these problems, it really won't be anybody. I want to acknowledge that the state has been really helpful and has been at the table with us to deliver funding to the district so that the district can afford some of the upgrades that they need to do. The state and the feds have just, really helped the tribe build a dialogue and a record around these issues. And so, like the state CDC, the drinking water program have been wonderful to work with. But if I was to say that there'd be, opposition, we have gotten some pushback from the governor's office regarding the ability of the tribe to regulate its own water. So we heard that the governor would be okay with, the property taxes being equal and with the tribe putting lands in protected status, but we heard that the governor would not be okay with the tribe then regulating water on those lands. So at this point, that's the only real, point of substantive opposition that I've heard. There are other folks who, have said that they're likely to oppose. They haven't really shared why. So I don't know, Representative Newell, if there's anything you want to add to that, though.
I just want to kind of go back to what Corey had mentioned, in regards with the tribe's relationship with the town of Perry that went back to the time between 2012, 2014 with the town of Perry in regards to the tribe conducting the feasibility study and drilling. The span of drilling, for occurred and it went on for 10 days. And like Corey mentioned, it affected some nearby. It was reported to the town of Perry that it affected some nearby wells from the drilling. But I want to say that, there was clear coordination with the tribe, EPA and IHS when they conducted that feasibility study. So my understanding is that, at that time there was a reaction, based that came from, the citizens in Perry to their, local town selectmen who responded fairly quickly in passing moratorium that didn't allow the tribe to move forward, and later on imposed a town ordinance, as Corey mentioned as well. However, my understanding is that and there was actually a quote in doing some of this research in regard to that. There was a quote in a local newspaper that indicated from a town selectman that they needed to protect the citizens in Perry. I can understand that and appreciate that. I understand, looking back at it, it was a point of contention, but I want to say that, the EPA came through in coordination with the tribe and remediated those issues that were expressed by the citizens of Perry. And they actually, provided and drilled new wells for one or two of those individuals. And what I've come to learn was actually one of those individuals was gaining water through a well that was located on tribal land. And from this, he since has been provided for in having his own well provided. So I think based on a conversation I had earlier this morning, I think we've come some way in our relationship with the town of Perry on these issues. And had a really nice discussion with the town selectmen, and I expect to follow that up tomorrow evening. I've been invited to a town meeting so that I can go over pieces of this legislation. I wanted to be upfront with the town of Perry and let them know ahead of time, as we've been meeting, several meetings Corey and I have been having with many people such as yourself, in addition to Corey meeting with, the governor's legal counsel, Attorney Reed. We met with state leadership last week. And so I just want to be upfront, and I absolutely encourage all the dialogue relating to this proposed legislation, and encourage anyone to come forth, and provide testimony, either for in support of or to note their concerns by neither for or against, or just come right out and provide testimony against it, and to really allow the Judiciary Committee to be informed and be given the information and gain the knowledge to make their determination by way of their vote in order for this piece of legislation to move forward. We certainly hope that we'll get some good testimony and we'll be able to see it through. I hope that answered your question, or I hope I didn't go too far off.
I don't think you went off at all. I think that was a very helpful answer to the question. Thank you. Thank you very much. So just two more questions, because I see we have just a couple minutes left. So one question is, so if this doesn't pass, and if 1626 doesn't pass, what's another avenue forward? What are other options that are available for addressing this problem?
Well, we're going to just have to continue doing what we have been doing. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we've started testing the water on a regular basis on the reservation because the water district doesn't test here. So we're keeping a much closer eye on the quality of the water so we can develop a body of data around that. We're also going to continue working with the water district. I mean, they have a bunch of money from the tribe right now, and they need to upgrade their system. And so they are legally obligated to do that. And so we're going to make sure that they are following through on their commitments to the state and to the tribe and to our nonprofit partners to make sure that those upgrades go through. The tribe also has received an updated feasibility study grant from the federal government to update the study that I mentioned from 2010 to look at alternate supplies of water. We held off on implementing that, but are going to move forward with studying alternate supplies of water, because we feel pretty strongly that even if these new filters are added, that a pretty significant upgrade to an alternate supply it's going to be necessary at some point. It's getting more shallow, the weather's getting more violent. We think that the water quality problems here will only be exacerbated over time. So we're going to look for alternate supplies. And in the meantime, just try to make sure that people on the reservation have water available that they feel safe drinking.
I think I'd like to add to that, Corey said a lot there, and I'm in complete agreement. I think this piece of legislation has certainly brought attention to the issue, but certainly will continue to communicate and inform, the tribal citizens here in Sabayak, that we're working towards a resolution. and to make some change. But I think we certainly need to continue the dialogue to see change brought forth. I certainly don't want decades or 2 or 3 generations down the road to still have to experience what some of our elders have been experiencing for many decades and many generations. And I think we've reached a point in time where it should no longer be acceptable that the people here, tribal citizens in Sabayak, are having to deal with this issue. So we're certainly hopeful that this will move. In relation to the testing, Corey mentioned we are doing our own testing now to have our own data. And in a recent larger stakeholder meeting, we were encouraged to learn by EPA that they were going to have a discussions relating to another compliance point of testing here on the reserve. So I think we'll be able to compare data with our own testing, as well as should that go through with that data. So that should be able to provide us with a different picture. I was very surprised to learn, and certainly I hope that it'll come up in additional conversations, the amount of funding that the tribe pays. I personally requested in my research and was very surprised to learn how much the tribe pays out and on an annual basis to the district. And testing was a point of contention for me when I first learned that they weren't conducting testing here on the reserve. And it related back to not having the resources to cover the cost of testing. So I've been pretty adamant about that and vocalizing, advocating, I should say, for that to happen. So I'm very pleased that our environmental department is conducting its own testing. But I was very surprised to learn that over a 5-year period, the tribe has provided and paid to the district over $676,000. That's a lot of money to be going into the district. And, we'll see what happens with this legislation, and hopefully we'll be able to see some changes at that level, but certainly hope that we'll continue moving forward with this dialogue to see a different resolution in the future, certainly.
Thank you both so much for taking the time to be here today to educate us about this issue and about this legislation. We covered a lot of ground in an hour. And I want to thank everybody who is able to join us today. There were a lot of really great questions in the chat, very thoughtful questions, and I appreciate that engagement. This is being recorded, like I said, and I am going to save the chat. So I'll be sharing information and links that was shared there as well. And you should be getting that either later today or tomorrow from us. But I do just want to thank Representative Newell and Corey, both of you again for being able to be here today, and for everybody else for being able to join us. And I will see you Thursday, and I hope many other people will see you there then as well. So thank you very much. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.